Hello and a good morning, wherever you are watching this channel. I hope you are doing well. We meet once again, and today we are going to take a look at our next topic, and that is on biological classification. By the end of this particular lesson, students are expected to know the history and then the importance of classification, and we are giving reference to the Aristotle, then the Linus, etc. Then we are also going to take a look at the schemes of classification, and then we'll be taking a look at the binomial nomenclature, and we end it all at virus to identify if the virus is a living thing or a non-living thing. Now, without wasting much time, I would like us to proceed quickly to the very first understanding under this particular topic, and that has to do with the definition for biological classification. Biological classification. What is biological classification? Biological classification refers to the sorting and grouping of living things in accordance to their common features or characteristics. It is basically a branch of biology that is called taxonomy, and this deals with the scientific classification of living things. Let's take a look at the reasons for classifying organisms. 1. It makes identification of living things easier and then consistent. 2. For easy communication between scientists, as it enables quicker referencing. So, the very first one, you're talking about the easy identification of organisms. We are seeing that when you classify, eventually a name is given to the organism. So it makes it much easier for us to see that, okay, a goat is a goat because of the characteristics that are peculiar to that particular organism. And then for easy communication, the name that we call it in Ewe for a goat, for instance, is Egbon. Accounts will call it Aponchi, but they have features that is the reason why it's been given such a name. So in order to communicate with scientists all over the world, a specific name is given to that particular organism, which we'll soon take a look at. So when you go to Nigeria and then you mention Siamese, Siamese is referring to a maize. If you go to Ghana, if you go to China, wherever you go to and then you mention Siamese, the referencing is very easy. We are able to identify it or see it, and then also we are able to communicate with each other because it is a scientific name. Number 3, reasons for classifying organisms. It helps in identifying similarities and then differences between organisms. We are able to strike out the differences that would exist between organisms because if you are classifying them, you are doing so because of the characteristics that are peculiar. So we can use those characteristics to describe the organisms. Another importance or reason for classifying organism is that it allows species to be identified and classified. In fact, there are millions of species which are still being classified, and the classification is actually based on the characteristics, so we cannot finish classifying the organism. So further work is being done, and I will encourage you one day when you become a scientist, you join in this particular state of getting living things classified. and it enables tracing geographical distribution of organisms. Geographical distribution of organisms based on the features that they have. We can reference that to the kind of habitats that they are from, because they are specifically adapted to such a condition. Because of the way the habitat is, they should be able to have a feature that will enable them to adapt to that particular environment. So classification will be able to will enable us to trace the geographic distribution of organisms as well. Now, these are the scientists that contributed to biological classification, and we owe them a lot of gratitude. We have Carlos Linus, we have John Ray, and then we have the Aristotle. These three um, researchers, we are going to talk briefly about them, starting from Carlos Linus. All right, so Carlos Linus, he was a Swedish biologist and then a taxonomist, and his mode of classification of the organism is actually based on the anatomical and adaptive similarities. The anatomical and then the adaptive similarities. Please take note of this. Now, when we talk about the anatomy, we are only talking about the physical characteristics, the structures of the organism that can actually be touched, that enables the organism to function to its optimum. And features, the adaptive features, we are referring to the characteristics of the organism that allows it to better cope or survive in the habitat that it finds itself. So Carlos was interested in actually giving out the similarities that exist between these organisms based on their anatomical characteristics and then the adaptive features. So his concept led to the publication of a classified plants and then animals, where he used the genus and then the species names of the organisms as their scientific names, otherwise accepted and known today as the biological nomenclature. So as part of this lesson, we're also going to take a look at the binomial nomenclature, and that would be in the next video that would be uploaded onto the channel. The next is Aristotle. Aristotle was a Greek natural philosopher, a biologist, and his effort was used for over 2,000 years before its replacement in the year 1960. Now, he was an earliest taxonomist whose classification principles of plants were based on the appearance and then the size of the plants. So he classified plants into herbs, into shrubs, and then trees. So trees are more pronounced relative to the shrubs. Then the herbs are the lower sized animals, so plants. So he classified them based on the appearance, how they look like. Now he also classified the animals based on the type of habitat in which they inhabit, and also the type of blood. So there are some animals that are regarded as cold-blooded animals, and then we also have some that are regarded as a warm-blooded animals. So Aristotle was basically doing his classification based on what he can see, the appearance. So he used the appearance to classify them. So it was useful, but we have the modern scientists who were able to prove beyond all reasonable doubt, and we now have a better way of classifying the living things. All right, so John Ray is also one of the scientists, and John Ray, he was also concerned with uh, putting the classification based on the concept of species, and he attempted a biological definition for the concept of species as a group of morphologically similar organisms rising from common ancestor. And this, once they have the common ancestry roots, he is he's saying that these organisms would have the tendency to interbreed in order to produce a fertile offspring. And that makes sense because I've never seen a goat mating with a sheep before. So he's saying that species should be able to interbreed. When they mate, okay, it results to the um, the reproduction process or the okay, all right. So let's take it from there. Okay, so another significant contribution of John Ray was to significantly um, bring about the division of plants into those that are having two seedling leaves when they germinate. So we refer to them as a dicot or a dicotyledonous plants. So we refer to them as dicotyledon. You know, the seed leaf actually is the one that the embryo depends on at the early stage of emergence when the seed is exposed to all the conditions necessary for germination. So initially, the cotyledon is the one we are referring to as the seed leaf. So this seed leaf, if it emerges and becomes like two, it comes out as two before you see the plant, um the plume coming out, then it means that that particular um plant should be classified as a dicot or a dicotyledonous plant or a dicotyledon. And if it comes as one, then it means that that is a monocotyledonous plant. Mind you, di means two and mono means one. So Ray was concerned in classifying the plants based on the two seedling leaves and then one seedling leaf. Take note of this, that John Ray is the scientist that came about with the concept uh, of, of species. So his contribution is very significant as well. So that is it about the three scientists that contributed immensely to the process of a classification that we are all using today in modern science. Now let's take a look at taxonomical ranking or schemes of classification. Taxonomical ranking or schemes of classification. Now all living things are classified into groups called taxon, from general to specific, from general to specific, and this is based on the characteristics that are common to them as we explained earlier. So when you look at it closely, we are saying that in order to arrive at a species, that is the very specific organism that we are actually after. Let me give this scenario. I enter into a class and I'm looking for um, who should I use? Who should I use? Who should I use? Who should I use? Bridget. So I'm looking for Bridget. And in the class of about 50, I don't know Bridget's name. I don't know her name. But I can describe her. So if I enter into the class, I would say that, okay, all of you are students, but I want only girls. So girls will be grouped. Then after that, I'll say, oh, Bridget, I know is a tall, slim girl. So now we are going to sort out all the girls that are tall and then slim. So after the sorting, I have not come across the person that I'm still looking for. So we still have to go further. Okay, Bridget is dark. So all those who are dark in this smaller group, we are going to sort them out and take away all those who are fair. So you see how the trend is going. So it will come to a time that we'll have about 2 or 3 people out of the 100 students body. And now in specific terms, I would have to use some characteristics that can give me the actual person that I'm looking for, that is Bridget. So eventually, if we do the sorting, the downgrading, and realize that no, it's not with one person, then there is no doubt that she is the one that I'm looking for. All right. So want to take a look at how this is done. The ranking is done according to kingdom. We have division or phylum. We have class. We have order. We also have family, genus, and finally species. So this is how we can take a look at it. So when you look at the kingdom, phylum, class, order, family, genus, and then species, the arrow over here, this arrow, this blue arrow, is actually increasing in the similarities. So once there is there's a decrease in the similarities, there would be an increase in the numbers as well. By here, once there is an increase in the similarities, then there'll be a decrease in the numbers until we arrive at the species that we are actually looking for. All right. Now, this is a typical example of Linus. Linus was able to put this into perspective, and I would like us to use this to explain what I was saying earlier. So when you look at this particular illustration, you have the kingdom Animalia. We'll soon take a look at what a kingdom is. So when we are taking a look at what a kingdom is, we will be able to understand what a kingdom is. So just understand that one of the examples of the kingdom is Animalia, of which you and I form part of. So you have the sea star over there, also regarded as an animal. Yeah, because we are not photosynthetic, and we are able to locomote. So when you look at the 7 life processes that are peculiar to the animal, all this fall into that category. Now, we want to say that we want an animal that is not a vertebrate or a cephalovertebra. So the sea star is eliminated. So that brings about the phylum Chordata. Then you can see a snake here. The snake is also not not having the mammary gland. So they lay eggs. So we want all those that are having the mammary gland. So the snake has been eliminated, and that brings us to the class Mammalia. So right after this, we know that the squirrel is not a carnivorous animal. So if we come to the order Carnivora, the squirrel is eliminated. So on and on and on until we arrive at the species. The species over here. So we are after this particular species. Okay, right. So that is how, in reality, Carlos was able to rank the animals and then plants as well, in order to arrive at a specific names. So he was using the genus name and then the species name to give the name to that particular organism. And that makes it interesting. It's like I having the name Adumensa. I come from the family Adumensa. So if you go to Peki today and see that you're looking for the family, you are looking for Adumensa. In fact, they'll send you to a family house, and there are all the members in the family are called Adumensa. But if you mention Ernest, even Ernest, okay, there are a number of Ernest in the family. So you have to narrow it down to maybe my day of birth. So Kwesi. And Kwesi is more specific. So Ernest Kwesi Adumensa would reveal the true identity of who I am. So that is what we are actually using even in present day. All right, so like we mentioned, kingdom is the general grouping of organisms according to the general characteristics common to them. There are 5 kingdoms. We have the kingdom Prokaryote. What is peculiar to them is that they have indefinite nucleus. The nucleus is not definite. The nucleus is not definite. Example is the Nitrobacter, Nitrosomonas, Azotobacter, Bacillus. Now, this category in some cases are regarded as the bacteria family. We can say the cell is a definite cell. That's why we call it prokaryote. Pro means before. Karyo means nucleus. So the nucleus is not entirely formed. So the content of the nucleus is diffused in the cytoplasm of the organism. That is why they are called prokaryote. So they don't have a definite nucleus. So just understand that the bacteria family fall under this particular category. The next one is a Protoctista. They have a definite nucleus and they are single-celled. These organisms are actually single-celled organisms. So we have the amoeba. You've been hearing about amoeba. You've been hearing about Iglina. You've been hearing about Plasmodium. Plasmodium is a parasite that is responsible for malaria. Okay, so this then you also have a paramecium. So these organisms are single-celled organisms. The entire livelihood of the organism is dependent on just one cell. So that cell undergo replication and then they will split, and that will bring about their reproductive process. So reproduction in this type of organisms is known as a binary fission. Okay, another one is the fungi. The fungi are the mushroom family. They are multicellular, but they are not photosynthetic. They are multicellular, they are not photosynthetic. So this organism is also having something that looks like a root. It's having the head region that looks like an umbrella. Okay, but these are characteristics that are not the same as what we may see in the case of a plant. So we don't consider a mushroom as a plant. It is not a plant. Okay, so they fall under the kingdom fungi. Let's move on to the plantae. Plantae, they are multicellular and they are photosynthetic, unlike we have seen the case of the fungi. Though they are multicellular, but they are non-photosynthetic. All right. So the plant would have the leaves, it would have the stem, it would have the roots that are peculiar to this particular organism. So we classify them under the kingdom plantae. So example would be the flowering plants. We have the hibiscus and then etc. And then we can also have the fern plants. They are green in nature. It means that they are able to manufacture their own food. We mentioned earlier that the mode of nutrition in in plants and then animals. Okay, the difference is that plants are autotrophic, and in specific terms, they are photosynthetic because they make use of light to manufacture their own food. But in the case of fungi and then animalia, they are not photosynthetic. Okay, so we have the liverworts, we have the mosses, and we have the ferns, and they fall under this category. All right, so we have animalia. Animalia, they are multicellular and they are heterotrophic. Multicellular and they are heterotrophic. All right, so example is the human, goat, bird, fish, etc. Okay, so on we go. So these are the various classifications under the kingdoms. All right. In a very quick manner, let's just take a look at what a phylum is, because we will be delving a little further into this when we move on to look at something interesting. Okay, so phylum is a subdivision. Understand that it is a subdivision of kingdoms that group all organisms with similar characteristics, like we earlier mentioned, that we have the chordata, and that's in animals. Then in plants we can have a angiospermophyta, that is flowering plants. The category of plants that are able to flower are placed under the phylum angiospermophyta. Then you have the class. So the class is also a subdivision of a phylum. Class is a subdivision of the phylum. Then the order is a subdivision of the order is a subdivision of class. Family is a subdivision of the order, and then the genus is a subdivision of a family, and species is a group of organisms that are similar in structures, function, and characteristics that interbreed to produce fertile organisms. All right, so these are the taxonomical ranking of the living things that we have on Earth. So this is where we drop the curtains for the first session. We will proceed and then we take a look at the next one. So ladies and gentlemen, we will continue in our next video. Please make sure you play this video over and over so that you'll be able to get a deeper understanding to it. If you have a question, don't forget to put it on the page, the WhatsApp page, so that I can have it addressed in our next video. Until then, have a nice day.